In the next card, Threat and Risk Assessment, in this card you will record information about potential threats and future risks to the heritage being recorded. Risks are the result of threats and can be defined as a probability that a certain kind of damage or disturbance could happen in the future. If I click on my threat and risk assessment, that will take me to the threat and risk assessment part, and I can start to add information using directly this page. So I scroll down. First group of information needs to be added are threat events, and then I have recommendation and priority and the threat and risk assessor. Or another way to access these fields are to click on the plus button next to threat and risk assessment card, and that will expand the nested cards for threat events, recommendation and priority, and threat and risk assessor. As always, we start from the top to add the information to our cards. So the first one is threat event. Threats can be defined as phenomena, whether natural factors or human activities, that could damage heritage sites or features in the future. Threats, or sometimes called hazards, are potential sources of harm that may or may not be significant to the heritage. Whether a threat has a significant negative impact on a heritage resource will depend on other factors, such as exposure and vulnerability of the heritage. I define this vulnerability and exposure further below, and it is also defined in the tutorials if you refer to detailed condition assessment tutorial. But in brief, if some areas of the site are vulnerable and exposed to an identified threat, only then the threat would have significant negative effect on that area of the site. For example, a threat of flood is significantly greater threat to a mud brick structure located on a slope than it is to a stone structure located on top of a mound. Usually, a threat and risk assessment is recorded for the whole heritage place or feature that you're recording. It could be also done for a build component if the build component of the feature that you're recording has a significant value that it needs to have a separate risk assessment done for it than to the whole feature that it's part of. But in my example of the heritage house, the stairs and staircase that I was recording for this detailed condition assessment, the threat and risk assessment that I've done was for the whole house, which is this house here, and not specifically for the stairs and staircase. So for this, I leave the threat and risk assessment of my detailed condition assessment, this condition number 2, which I recorded for my component blank. I don't need to fill that information here, but I go to my heritage place, which is the house, and I do my risk assessment for my house. So if I go to my component, search for my component number in Emina, and then click on related resources, I see that my component now has an assessor, which is me, has a condition assessment, detailed condition assessment record for it, which is the detailed condition assessment that we've been recording for this component, and also is related to my house, which has this Emina number. And I can also see this list of relations here on the right side. So there are two ways to do it, as I explained in my first video. It's either from within my heritage place, I go to heritage place assessment summary page and add a detailed condition assessment to my heritage place, or the second route, which I didn't show you, I talked about it because it's a less recommended route, but I thought to show you how to do that, is to, if you want to add first your detailed condition assessment. So from Resource Manager, you click on Create a new detailed condition assessment, and then I want to link that back to my heritage place. So what I want to record for this detailed condition assessment is the most important one is the assessment summary card that I need to fill out in order to identify and say that who was the assessor, and if the assessor is already in the database, you click on the name, and if it's not, you have to type create, go to create a new person organization, and you can watch the video that is that is been made to show you how to create a new person organization. So you find the name, you add the name, and then you add the role of the investigator, and the activity that I'm recording here now, or I want to record, is the field risk assessment. And the date is the date that I visited the site in 2017, September 13th. So here I need to make sure that I relate my detailed condition assessment to heritage place. And this is where I need to find my IMINA number of the heritage place that I'm recording. So which is this IMINA that I copied, this number 0179565. So if I go back here, I can paste this number, and here the number comes up. I click on it, and then if I don't have any comments, I click on add. And what this does is, if I go to my related resources now, I can see that my heritage place, which is my house, has been added to this detailed condition assessment. And also, as soon as I clicked on add, I have my condition number, a new condition ID for my detailed condition assessment for this house. So I want to go to threat and risk assessment card down here in order to fill out the risk assessment information. So I click on the threat and risk assessment card. I go, so I can either start to fill out this information on the right hand side on this page, or I can click on the plus button here and see all this nested card to add information about threat event, and then recommendation and threat assessor. So first one is threat event, and as here I can choose the type of threat that I want to record for my site. So for this site, as I mentioned in my video before, I know from the owner that they want to reconstruct this house. So the threat that I want to record, and it's going to affect my building, is a threat of reconstruction. And probability, based on the conversation that I had with the owner, is likely. Percentage of site affected is the information about how much of the site, or how much of the threat that I'm recording will be affect the area, the assessed area. So this reconstruction will affect probably around 91, the totality 91 to 100% of my site. Next one is severity, and this one I record the magnitude and severity of my threat, or the possible negative effect which can lead to loss or decrease of the value of my heritage. So in this one, the severity, so I need to ask myself that if this reconstruction happen, how much it will affect the value of my building. And the answer that I have for that is severely is going to affect the value of the stoned heritage building. In this next field, vulnerability, you're going to record and identify the ways in which the heritage that you're recording is vulnerable to the threat that you recorded. Some vulnerabilities are inherent to the heritage that you recorded. For example, if a threat is identified as flood, if your building is built on mud brick material, then it's more vulnerable to flood. Or some vulnerability are external factors. For example, if the location of your mud brick structure is on a slope, then it is more vulnerable to flood. In this case, when I'm recording reconstruction for my this building, the main vulnerability of my house is mainly an uncontrolled development in this part of north of Lebanon, and that is the main thing that makes my building vulnerable to this to this threat of reconstruction. And the closest term that I have in this list for it is site or heritage management issues. In the next field, exposure, you record what part of the building that you're recording, or the heritage or the site that you're recording, is specifically might be exposed and affected by the identified threat. So this is a text field, and you can type in the area, and for this case is my whole building. Then I click on add. Then when I click on add, this information, my threat event, has been recorded under my threat events in highlighted blue. Then you also will notice that there are 3 new fields appear that I can add to my threat event. First one is my level of risk, if there are any secondary threats, and potential impact. I can go ahead and click on each of these fields to add information, or another way to access these new fields is by clicking on add new on top here, and then you can access each of these fields. I click on first one is risk level belief, and this field records the level of risk that the threat that I recorded presents based on all the factors that I recorded in the previous field. And for the risk of a threat of reconstruction that I was recording, my risk level is medium. So I choose medium and then click on add. Then I see this information has been added to my record. Next field that you can record is secondary threat type. In some scenarios, certain threats, if they occur, may lead to or trigger additional secondary threats. For example, following a flood, electrical equipment could malfunction and cause a fire. In our example of reconstruction, a secondary threat might be loss of authenticity and value of this heritage old building. So if I look for the term loss of value, and that is what I want to add as my secondary threat, you can see that as soon as I click on loss of value and it's recorded in my card tree, I can add more secondary threats for my identified reconstruction threat. So you can add as many secondary threats as needed. In this case, I only have one secondary one. Next field is potential impact type. And in this field, you record information about any potential effects that the threat that you recorded above, which is reconstruction, might have on your heritage. So my potential impact, I click on potential impact, and I choose any terms that is appropriate and relevant for my threat. Collapse of structural damage could be one impact of this reconstruction work, collapse of my and damage to my heritage house and building. I click on add. You can add as many potential impact as you want. You can click on add new, and for example, next one could be structural alteration, and I add that as well. When you're happy, you can move to the next one, which is recommendation and priority field. In the next field you want is the recommendation and priority. When you click on it, you come to the page with the fields that you need to fill out to give any recommendation. And this is where you record the recommended mitigation strategies and actions that can be taken to better preserve the heritage and mitigate the threats and or potential impact that you recorded above. So one mitigation strategy for this reconstruction work that I recorded could be under management and planning activity, and is intervene with owner. Priority in which I want this activity to be taken is within 1 to 2 years. From my understanding from the owner, this is something that will happen, but not urgently. So it has a high priority, but it's within not urgent. So it's within 1 to 2 years. And a type of my activity that I'm recommending is mitigation activities and strategy. And then I click on add, and that will record my first recommendation. You can click on add new up here, or go and click on the recommendation and priority again to get a new blank page and start to record more recommendation activity for your the risk assessment that you just recorded. Last field is the threat and risk assessor field. And this is where you add the name of the person, group, or organization who did the risk assessment. So in this case, I start to add first name first and then last name. And then I click on add. If there are more than one person working on this assessment, you can click on add new, or click on threat and risk assessor again, and add the name of the second or third person. So this is how you fill out. I filled out my threat and risk assessment card and activity for my building, my